The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 165.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Voyager episode, The Gift. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thank you. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to join the StarQuest fan club by texting StarQuest to 66866. That's StarQuest to 66866. I also want to encourage you to stick around to the end of the episode. We have a little bit of listener feedback. And I want to take a moment now to tell you about another show that's on the StarQuest network that you would probably enjoy called The Catholics of Oz. They are geeks like us. They really enjoy sci-fi, Star Trek, and other things. They talk about that. They talk about faith-related topics. They talk about science. It is our three friends from Australia, Lindsay, Lino, and Caroline, and their show is every other week. So be sure to check it out, The Catholics of Oz, at sqpn.com/Oz. All right, but today we are talking about this Voyager episode, The Gift. This is a fourth season episode. We've jumped back again to takes place just after the episodes in which Seven of Nine has joined the crew. So, Jimmy, could you give us a recap of what happens in this episode?
Yeah, so despite the fact it's called The Gift, this episode should have been titled after a line from Groucho Marx and called, "Hello, I must be going." The Voyager has survived its previous encounter with the Borg and Species 8472, but it's got lots of Borg tech merged into it, which is causing problems, and they're having trouble scraping it off. Seven of Nine also has lots of Borg tech merged into her, which is causing problems, but the Doctor is in the process of scraping it off. Janeway convinces Seven to help get rid of the problematic Borg technology in the ship, but Seven is suffering from severe Borg withdrawal and is jonesing for an assimilation fix. When the opportunity presents itself, she tries to send a subspace message to the Borg so that she can get back together with the band. At the same time all this is happening, Kess's psychic powers are growing off the scale, and soon they are posing a danger to Voyager. To prevent this danger and to allow her to complete her transformation into some kind of super being, Kess takes a shuttlecraft and leaves the ship. As a final gift to Voyager, she throws them 10,000 light years closer to home and safely out of Borg space, so we should never have to worry about encountering the Borg again on this series.
Until next week.
The end.
The end. So a couple interesting facts about this episode. One, it's directed by Anson Williams, who old folks like me will recognize as Potsy Weber from Happy Days. And Jerry Ryan at one point talked about how she had just got off of another show called Dark Skies, where she was with Ralph Malph on that one.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then she was with Potsy.
Another Happy Days character.
Yes. Yep. And then she was like hoping to be with Richie Cunningham at some point, Ron Howard, the director, who, went on to, that's his bigger fame. So that's pretty fun. Maybe he'll direct a Picard episode with Jerry Ryan and she'll have the trifecta. But more pertinent to this series, it's interesting. This was supposed to be the fifth episode of season 4, not the second episode. So they were going to draw out the departure of Kess for some reason, and but then they changed gears, and it originally wasn't supposed to be Kess that was leaving.
Well, there's a dispute about that.
Okay, so what I read was that they were going to get rid of Garrett Wang in order to make room in the budget for Jerry Ryan. But then he was named one of People's 50 Most Beautiful People of that year, and they decided that would be bad PR. And so Jennifer Lean or Leanne, I don't know how her name's pronounced, was next. And so that's why she got it. She's also said in interviews that she chose to go because she didn't feel like the character was going anywhere. So maybe that's the other.
And it's also been claimed that the writers felt that her character arc had been played out, and so that's why she went. I don't see these things as being mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I can see that. If I had to reconstruct what happened, I would guess that, well, we need to bring in a new character to juice up the ratings, and so we're going to need to lose somebody to make room in the budget. Who would that be? Well, either Kes or
Harry
or Garrett Wang or Harry. So it's going to be one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, as I was kind of joking beforehand, was the title the gift, the fact that the gift that Kes is finally leaving the show?
No, the gift would have been if she took Neelix with her.
Yeah. I think they made the right choice here.
Yeah.
Harry is the more interesting character. I mean, they still left him with a lot of unexplored potential, but I as much as I can like Kes in individual scenes, they just wasted this character and all of the plot potential she had.
Right. From the beginning. And I think part of that was because they connected her so closely to Neelix, and even though they had them split up romantically, it was too late. I mean, they were a pair, and it just limited what her character could do. And then they had this weird like love triangle thing going on throughout her time. You know, is she going to end up with Neelix? Or is she going to end up with the Doctor, as weird as that would be? Is she going to end up with Tom Paris? And I don't know, it just felt weird and limiting to the character because it didn't let her, she never was able to stand on her own. She was always somebody's appendage.
Well, yeah, she has almost no agency.
Right.
Yeah.
And the actress, even though in a human being, you know, I like gentleness and compassion and stuff, the way the actress played her was just so soft, and that she's not coming across as an agent.
Right.
She's not making her own decisions and doing stuff and developing as a character. She's just reacting.
Yeah, which makes it interesting when this character will come back in a few seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
a
opposite.
big mistake.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. So, to talk about this episode too, one of the things I read about it is that they made a conscious decision to change how they talk about the Borg in this episode. Because in the past, they've referred to the Borg more as like a drug, like you mentioned, Jimmy, like because it looks like Seven is in having drug withdrawals, or like a cult is another way that they've kind of referred to it. But a wolf pack is kind of more of a positive thing, not so much a negative. Like a wolf pack is I mean, if you're being attacked by a wolf pack, it's not so positive. But a wolf pack internally is supportive. We work together. We are cooperative. We are, we are strong together, sort of thing. And I think Janeway, in fact, calls it something like that at one point.
Does she?
There was a discussion in her ready room with Chakotay where she said something along those lines. It was because Annika was raised by wolves, essentially, is how she kind of referred to it.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't pick up. I'm not sure. I don't recall the Borg ever really being discussed in terms of being a wolf pack. I certainly wouldn't view that as their primary characteristic.
No.
And humans actually are a lot more like wolves in that respect.
Right. Although,
Well,
yeah.
And I mean, they do
that's
talk.
what our families are. It's our pack.
Yeah.
Right. And they do talk about in this episode about the Borg basically being one consciousness. That it's, the many voices, but it's all one consciousness that works together.
It's more a hive than anything.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously the analogy they go for. And of course, later when they bring the Borg Queen over from First Contact, that's exactly what they're going for. Is this is the queen of the hive?
Right. The primary conflict, the driver of the plot here is that the warp drive is offline because of the Borg technology. And
and that makes it's so this is one of the writing flaws in this episode. If that's the primary driver, we need to have an approaching Borg menace.
Yeah.
And we don't. we know, yeah, maybe the Borg will show up and menace us, but we have nothing building towards that.
Right.
Even at the end, when Kes restores their warp drive and throws them 10,000 light years closer to home, there's no Borg ship coming over the horizon.
No.
That would actually created some real drama and tension.
Yeah.
In the situation.
I mean,
it's coming to respond to this Seven's distress call.
I know. As soon as Seven, and as soon as they tell us at least a partial distress call went out, that's Chekhov's distress call.
Yes.
There needs to be a ship come and investigate that distress call from the Borg, and there's not.
Right.
Right.
And there's one point where they talk about how they pick up some, remnants of a, transwarp conduit, whatever particles float out there in space after one of those things close. But it's like it's over on the edge of the sensor range,
Yeah, it's nowhere close. I'm not sure why they made that decision to not create that sense of imminent threat.
Well, Voyager writing.
Voyager, right?
Yeah.
Right. So they need 7 of 9 to help clear out the Borg tech, and she's reluctant because she feels like she's been kidnapped, which she essentially has been. And she doesn't want to leave the collective. And I'm thinking, what are the ethics here of forcing her to leave the collective? In one sense, she's kind of almost like we would say the equivalent of a trafficked person, someone who's kidnapped and forced into this life that was against her will at the time, even though she kind of wants to be there now. And Janeway's like, no, this is for your own good, and I'm going to force this on you. What are the ethics of this? Is Janeway in the right?
The bottom line, yeah.
Okay.
She had so Annika Hansen, and we learn Seven's human name for the first time in this episode. She was Annika Hansen. She was assimilated 20 years ago when she was a little girl because her parents were irresponsible space hippies.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had been investigating the Borg even, and with this naive space hippie, they're not a threat. Let's just investigate them, idea.
Right. They're like mountain gorillas that we can go
Yeah.
examine. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was assimilated against her will at a young age, and it doesn't matter what age she was. Anyone who is assimilated against their will and then has their brain reprogrammed forcibly to where they want to be part of the collective is not making a personal decision at that point.
Right.
They are under this alien reprogramming influence, and the responsible ethical thing to do would be to remove them from that and restore them to a state of rationality. Now, if once they're back in a state of rationality, and Seven raises this possibility, she still chooses and says, I've experienced it both ways, and I think the Borg way is better. I want to go back. Well, then the ethical thing to do would be, at least arguably, to let her go back. Now, the counter argument would be, you're going to be a threat. I'm not going to let you go back. It's like saying, I want to go back to being a terrorist.
Right.
Or something.
Yeah.
But in terms of choosing her belief system and so forth, all things being equal, if she, in a state of rationality, makes that decision, then it's a bad choice, but she's a free agent making a free choice at that point. Right. She was not a free agent at this point. And so it's ethical to restore her to a state of free agency and allowing her to make that decision at that juncture.
Right. Well, and you mentioned earlier that it was, very much, invoking, drug use and overdosing on drugs and things like that. And that's very much, in my opinion, the analogy of, Janeway's basically doing an intervention. And, you're on drugs. You're so drugged out that you can't even think straight. All you want is the next hit. I'm going to help you get out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to fight me and you're going to hate this and it's going to be painful, but we're going to get you through it and we'll get you cleaned up.
And the analogy here would be someone who was like kidnapped and then forced onto drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Against their will. If you get them cleaned up and then they decide to go back to drugs, that's their decision. Yep. But since they were kidnapped and forced into an addiction,
right,
it's legitimate to say, okay, we're going to get you off of this so you can then make rational choices on your own.
Right, which fits the space hippie theme of her parents.
Well, or if someone were indoctrinated into a fringe religious group with extreme practices, and then this is a deprogramming.
No, that's unethical.
Right.
That's because in that case, people went in and either made their own decision to join the group.
Oh, okay.
The fact it's fringe has nothing to do with anything.
Right.
Okay.
That's just a popularity meter.
Yeah.
If they made their decision, or they made the decision to raise their children
Mhm.
in a religious group of whatever nature, you can't rip them out of the group and propagandize them to the contrary.
Right.
You can persuade them, but
Right.
not by ripping them out, not by kidnapping them and propagandizing them. You have to treat them as a human being with respect and pursue ordinary means of persuasion and conversion.
Right.
Yeah, that's where the analogy of human trafficking and the forced drug addiction is
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
accurate.
The fact that Annika and her parents were forcibly assimilated is key to the moral calculus.
Mhm.
If Annika had been a responsible adult and chose to join the Borg Collective, you could not do this to her.
What if her parents had chosen to join the Borg Collective?
That's more problematic.
It would have been an
Mhm.
interesting story,
Mhm.
actually.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it would have been interesting if they'd done that. Well, in
No.
any case, Janeway's the only one who's convinced that she can save Seven. Everyone else
Mhm.
is skeptical. And she assumes the authority.
Wait. You're saying Catherine Janeway has a messiah complex?
No, not at all. But
She's just being the captain of the ship, the mother of the ship, you know.
right. No other Starfleet captain would do this. But they all sort of do this at one point or another of some form. But she does assume the authority to make decisions for Seven, essentially declaring a non-compos mentis, like she's not in her right mind.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm doing this. It's interesting how with Cass becoming a Jedi Master or whatever it is she's becoming,
Yeah.
she's got telekinetic powers and she can mess with people's heads. Ironically, without Cass's telekinetic powers developing, there was a moment where Seven was dying from this implant going wrong in her brain. The doctor wasn't able to do anything, and so Seven might not have survived. And so it's interesting how they've set it up in the plot that Cass's evolution is key to Seven's survival and her
Mhm.
replacing her essentially on the show. That was interesting.
And Janeway points this out in a line of dialogue where she's talking to Tuvok, and she says, "I've got an Ocampan who wants to be something more, and a Borg who's afraid of being something less. Here's
Mhm.
to Vulcan stability."
Yes,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
was a good line. The other interesting aspect of this episode is it sort of is presages what we see in the Picard season 1, where Hugh, the former Borg, is
Mhm.
taking Borg drones and deborging them, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. And it's essentially the Doctor here is sort of pioneering the techniques that are eventually used in that show. And so I find it kind of interesting to think about how the connection between Seven's
Mhm.
transformation and what goes on there, and Seven's involvement in that series.
Yeah, and Janeway says that she's met Borg who have left the collective, so it doesn't say explicitly that she met Hugh or one of his followers, but she says she has met former Borg drones who have left.
Do you think she meant Picard? Because that's what I was kind of thinking that she meant.
Oh,
Picard-
Possible.
I thought she was referring, because they do run across a colony of ex-Borg,
Yeah.
and before the Borg children.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And I thought that's what she was referring to.
Oh, right.
I forgot about that episode because
Is that
my
episode-
first thought was Hugh. It's like, well, it's possible, but you think they would have said that if that's what they were implying?
I didn't remember that episode was before this, but yeah, certainly it had to have been before this because there was no Seven in that episode. That would have made it would have made that episode very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Shows you how
that's true.
memorable that episode was.
Well, it's hard to keep them all straight in your mind, what occurs when, or at least it is for me. There is an interesting moment. So after Seven tries to send the distress signal, and she's put in the brig, and Janeway goes down to talk to her, and she sort of confronts Janeway like, "Oh, so this is what freedom is. You stick me in jail." It's like, well, duh, you just assaulted Harry and tried to signal the Borg to come and assimilate us. Of course we're going to put you in the brig. That freedom is not unlimited. Let's put it that way. I thought that was interesting. But Seven has it kind of throws this into Janeway's face. Like, you would deny us the choice as you deny us now. Like, this is the line. You've imprisoned us in the name of humanity, yet you will not grant us your most cherished human right to choose your own fate. You are hypocritical, manipulative. We do not want to be what you are. I mean, she's really...
Yeah, and there's nice acting from Jerry Ryan in
Yeah.
this.
Oh,
in-
yeah.
in this episode.
I think Jerry Ryan is underrated. She's not just a pretty face in Voyager. I think she does a great job, and in Picard. And this really shows it, because this episode...
Oh yeah, she's got significant range as an actress. Like in that later episode where she has the doctor's mental patterns in her, and so she's aping Robert Picardo's mannerisms and
That's
stuff.
right.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was great. Yeah.
That was a good one. Yeah, but I this interaction between Janeway and Seven in the brig is kind of fascinating. I think this was perhaps some of the better writing in this episode, at least from my point of view.
Yeah. Much
the-
better than the Kess stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The Kess stuff was just a bunch of scenes of her. There were paint by number scenes of her powers increasing and becoming more dangerous, and coupled with lots of goodbye scenes.
Yep.
For
Right.
her and the characters that she has been close to. So Neelix, Tuvok, the Doctor,
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like that was almost pasted on. Like, again, because that was supposed to happen in episode 5 as opposed to this second episode of this season. Maybe that's why it felt a little pasted on.
Yeah, it's also there because all those scenes, because her decision to leave the ship is last minute, she can't actually say goodbye to any of these characters in these scenes. So they're goodbye scenes without goodbyes,
Right.
which
right.
helps make them feel artificial. It's like, why are we having this scene?
yeah, exactly. In fact, there's the essentially the goodbye scene for her and Neelix in the mess hall, and she starts to go transparent and glow again, and she's kneeling like she's in religious ecstasy. Did you catch that?
Oh, yeah.
It was a very interesting religious imagery that Anson Williams, the director, decided to go for in that. I felt like it was clearly a religious ecstasy.
Well, it's clear they're making her like she's ascending to another plane, that she's, which is kind of a recurring theme, including in Lower Decks where you got the koala. Why is he smiling?
Yes, that was a great episode. The Ascension.
I want to know, so is she the first Ocampan this has ever happened to? Does her people have legends of this happening? Why is this happening to her all of a sudden, other than she needs to leave the show? What's the in-universe reason for this?
Well, they talk about quite kind of throughout her run about how her species has latent telepathic abilities and psychic abilities, all these things. And
so do Vulcans.
Yeah.
Betazoids.
But I think what they're trying, obviously it was, let's get her off the series as quickly as possible. But it was, they tried to make it like that this was a natural evolution. At least I feel like they tried to make it was a natural evolution of their abilities and failed.
Yeah.
That they were trying to make it as this is where the Compans really could go. And this is why they have such a short life here in the universe, because they go to a different plane by the end of their life. But they never set that up well. They never explained it well. They just kind of like, that's it.
I was under the impression that the caretaker was limiting them, and with the caretaker gone, the limitations were gone as well.
Maybe, but
that might have been my head canon.
If this happened to every Ocampan, we should have heard about this from day one.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think the fact we haven't implies this is rare.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't come completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Girl's psychic powers go crazy one day and she ascends to another plane they should at least have buffered it with like, oh, this thing that's happening to me, I have an idea what this might be. My people have legends about this.
Mm-hmm. That's
it's
true.
rare, but it's not unknown.
Right.
And
it does come out of left field. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what got cut out on the writers' room when they decided to move up from the 5th episode to this episode.
Yeah.
How to explain why this works. It's just like, we just got to make it work.
You're so generous to the writers.
Somebody's got to be once in a while. I mean, they're not all completely clueless, mostly, but not completely.
Okay, well, speaking of the writers, I have yet another one of these to add to our list of weird Voyager writing quirks. So there's some kind of, everything is some kind of. There's the unlimited supplies of torpedoes and shuttles. Here's another one. Whenever anyone calls the bridge, they never say what's happening. They just say to the captain, you better come to sick bay. You better come to the break.
Yeah.
But no one says why. Just why? Okay, I'm kind of busy. What's going on?
Even we have a situation would be an improvement.
Yeah.
Right.
Emergency in sick bay. Better get down here.
Yes. It's such artificial drama that they're making here. Like, you better come to sick bay. And then we cut perhaps to a commercial or just cut to a different scene. It's like, I just had to laugh when I realized they kept doing it in this episode. Let's see. Another little correct. This is a little thing I saw that the captain notes that 7 of 9 or Annika was born on stardate 25479. So 7 of 9 was born on 7/9. I don't know. It was dumb.
Yeah, that was the writers being too clever by half.
Yes. But back to the more important things.
Maybe there's 24th century numerologists who would look at your birthday and tell you, oh, you're going to be assimilated by the Borg and your name will be 7 of 9.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it will be.
Which by the way, talking about the date, it said in here that she was assimilated 20 years before this.
Okay.
So she was actually assimilated before Q sent
Yes.
the Enterprise D.
Yeah.
So the Borg knew about humans before the humans knew about Borg.
Right.
By years.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, the episode that comes up where we see the assimilation of her family, it makes that clear that her family were the first to encounter the Borg. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about a decade
Yeah.
before the Enterprise D met them.
One of the things we're talking about, like, being able to make a choice for our fate, both Kes and Seven tell Janeway that their fate should be their decision. And it's interesting, Janeway acquiesces to Kes very quickly. Like, I'm not going to get in your way. Sure, whatever you decide to do, that's up to you. But not to Seven. So I thought that difference is interesting. I mean, it's explainable. She has an established relationship with Kes. She knows who she is. She understands.
She knows
her.
Kes is a rational agent.
Yes.
Right.
And Seven is not. But I felt that was an interesting duology that they set up in this episode between two people and, making choices about their fate and why one gets to and the other one doesn't.
Well, it also helps that Kes starts blowing up bulkheads before they finally throw her off the ship. So, I mean, that helps a lot.
Right. My last little note here on this episode that I had was that at one point, Chakotay tells the captain that they have crews working round the clock on the outside of the hull, removing the Borg technology. And I was thinking to myself at the end, I hope there was no one was out there doing that when cast through the ship 10 light years or 10,000 light years forward, because they're probably floating around back there still.
Well,
if they had their shields up, maybe there was a no slip zone around the ship and they got thrown with them.
Let's hope.
Or they probably had their magnet boots on,
Yes, although they get shook pretty good. But yeah, there's that was one funny thing I thought. All right. So, any other notes from you, Father Cory?
It was interesting that they did in the writing kind of show, and I'm assuming it's in the writing. I'm assuming it's not slips in production or whatever.
Yeah.
But that Seven several times will switch from the first person plural to the first person singular. She'll sometimes will say I versus we.
Yeah.
And I took it and I felt like this was an intentional choice of saying she's starting to, just as her body is starting to reassert its humanity, her language is starting to reassert her individuality.
Right.
And this was a conscious choice that they made, more and more of these slips, quote unquote, as it went along. Now, again, that could be like, said Jimmy, I'm giving too much credit to the writers and to the producers, but, it did kind of seem like that.
Jimmy?
So early on in this episode, as Kes's powers are starting to manifest telekinetically, she does this meditation exercise with Tuvok, where he's got this lamp that's been lit, and he's having her control the flame by amplifying it and diminishing it, and then she sees to see a realm below the subatomic, and he points out there is nothing below the subatomic. And she says, yeah, there is, and I'm seeing it. And this is kind of a little ambiguous. I would interpret her statement to mean below the known subatomic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's easily possible. I mean, there are theories now about, well, hey, if you look at the standard model, there are some interesting patterns in the known particles that suggest there may be more fundamental ones underneath that we just haven't found yet. And the same thing could happen in the 24th century. But Tuvok is like, there's nothing below that. And, well, that would be true on the pedantic level of, well, if it's even smaller than I mean, if we're talking about small, we've got the atomic level, and then there's everything under that. And, and so you're just talking about a new realm of the subatomic, but they don't really, it's a little bit wonky in the writing, but the interesting thing here to me is Vulcans have a telekinesis exercise. I mean, up to now, Vulcans have had limited telepathic ability, not as much as Betazoids, but more than humans. And humans do have some in Star Trek. They established that in the second pilot. But here we have evidence of Vulcans having a telekinesis training exercise. And I'm not aware of other references to Vulcan telekinesis.
Wasn't there an episode early on where Kes was doing this same exercise and ends up burning Tuvok in the process? I want to say that was like very, like first season, like very early on, like third or fourth episode, where she did the same exercise, and because she wasn't controlling her psychic abilities yet, she actually turned and started burning him, and his face all melts up and everything. Of course, bad special effects, but
he does say in this, "You've never shown this level of control before."
Understatement from a Vulcan understatement.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I thought that was interesting. Also, there's a moment where Janeway has got Seven in the brig and is going to come in to show her pictures of herself before she was assimilated. And Seven is like, "If you come in here, I'm going to kill you." And Janeway like goes in anyway. It's like,
right,
lady, this other lady just said she's going to kill you. I'm not sure about this decision. Then it was a little ironic. So at the end, as explodey things are exploding in the corridor for no good reason other than Kes. I mean, why are those even there?
Right.
Kes's powers are going crazy, and they're trying to get her down to the shuttle bay. And they run into Tuvok in the hallway, and Tuvok does an emergency mind meld to try to stabilize her for just a minute. And I thought, ooh, it's ironic that he's merging his mind here with Kes while Seven is back down in sickbay or down in the brig, totally jonesing for a mind meld.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is something they should have explored, just like they've had Tuvok helping Kes with her psychic powers. They should have, not just could have, but should have had Tuvok help Seven with her assimilation separation anxiety. They should have had him, or if they had a non-psychotic Betazoid crew member, go down to Seven periodically and say, okay, look, we can be together mentally for a little bit, to reassure you and help you feel close to other people who are not drones. This would have been a logical part of Seven's repatriation therapy, and they didn't follow up on that.
That's a good point. Yeah, there is at least one other Vulcan on board, the one we saw in the Lower Decks episode, the Lower Decks of Voyager, not the TV show.
Good Shepherd?
Yes, I think that's what it was. So there is at least that one other Vulcan. Yeah. All right. So anything else on that one, guys? If not, I'm going to move on to our listener feedback. We got an email from Robert.
Yay.
Commented on our episode 100, so it goes back a bit a ways, in which we talked about the book Picard, Last Best Hope. That was a sort of prequel origin story for the Picard series. And Robert said, "I love the book for Picard. I would love to have them make it as a season for Picard. Also, from past episodes regarding Enterprise, I love the fact that the crew is afraid to use the transporter, and original series McCoy was afraid of the transporter, and Next Gen Season 2 Dr. Pulaski was afraid of the transporter, and Lieutenant Barclay. So that still shows that there's lots of transporter fear among people." And I do kind of like that idea that not everyone is on board with all this future technology that's out there, including the Death Scrambler machine.
Yeah.
So Thank you, Robert, for that email. I kind of doubt they would make a season out of Picard with about Last Best Hope, just because.
The economics of that aren't what they would need to be. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do like how it's like, today, not everybody is a fan of flying.
Right.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Jenny sent an email about our discussion on Star Trek VI in episode 161. She says, so my feedback is that you've made me feel really, really old since you found it necessary to have to actually give an explanation of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall in East Germany, etc. Join the club, Jenny. So,
Well,
however,
I think in that it's helpful. I mean, it was helpful to me, and I lived through those events, to just remember them and make them explicit.
yeah, yes,
Right.
Because, there were things in watching Star Trek VI that it initially didn't strike me, and then it's like, oh, wait, this is an echo of this thing that really did happen. And I
Right.
wanted to make sure that the listeners, whether they did live through them or didn't, had those events ready to mind for interpreting the movie.
I'm sorry I missed that episode because that's one of my, of course, one of the favorite
yeah.
movies. It's one of the great movies, and it does have a lot of those themes of the reconciliation of the East and the West and all that stuff. So
Jenny does point out that we made one error where we included Yugoslavia as a member of the Warsaw Pact. But even back in the day, most people made that mistake.
It was definitely in the Soviet orbit.
Yes, but it was
was.
never actually joined the Warsaw Pact, which made it very interesting and very different from all of the other countries in Eastern Europe that were dominated by the Soviet
that's
Union.
right. That's
So-
right.
Very interesting. I didn't know that myself. Luis sent an email about the same discussion on Star Trek VI. I know Jimmy compared the potential reaction to Saavik being a traitor to Geordi being revealed as one, but I think a better and sadly real example was the reaction to the first Mission Impossible movie, where Jimmy Phelps, the beloved leader of the IMF team from the TV series, was made into the traitor. Sure, I watched that movie and its sequels, but I'll never forgive the jerk who turned one of my favorite TV characters into the bad guy for no good reason at all.
So I'm sympathetic here. I was a fan of Mission Impossible before the first movie came out, and I do not blame Robert Graves at all for refusing to appear in that movie, because they made his character a traitor.
Right.
And they did so right at the beginning of the movie. And this is a betrayal of years that he'd spent as, the central figure of the Mission Impossible team, suddenly being revealed as a traitor at the beginning of the first movie. That's just cheap and a betrayal. And
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all. I don't think that it would be the closest analogy with Saavik, though, because Saavik was a relatively recently introduced character, and she wasn't Jim Kirk.
Right.
This would be turning Jim Phelps into a traitor, would be more like turning Jim Kirk into a traitor,
Right.
because he was the lead character on the show.
Yes.
And so like Jim Kirk is the lead character on Star Trek.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. What they did to Phelps with the Mission Impossible movie was a cheap stunt. I mean, that's all it is. It's a cheap stunt.
Yeah.
And he was still played masterfully by John Voight, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's all of our feedback this week. We love getting your feedback, and we'd love to get more from you. You can give us feedback at StarTrek@sqpn.com. I do want to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Lori M., Kevin B., Joseph D., Jeffrey B., and Ben and Autumn P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that is it from us. What did you think of Voyager episode The Gift? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to, as I said, trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, Shuttle Pod 1. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Tom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, I took the liberty of stimulating your hair follicles. A vicarious experience for me, as you might imagine.